If an alien landed on this planet and said, what is happening every Saturday? Crowds all around the country are gathering, going batshit. I would be so curious. I would have to get involved in it. I don't understand how people can observe football and not want to go. I would be a husk of a man without it. Nottingham is a wonderful blend of the historic and the contemporary, and you have, I think, the funniest accent in the UK.
Hey, me luck.
So, Hey Up Me Duck is probably the most famous, which means hello, love, basically.
Ashportmissen.
Real sort of city full of culture and history, in particular, obviously a real sort of hub of sports. Cricket, tennis, football, of course.
Smallest city to win the European Cup. And until recently, Notts County were the oldest football league club in the world, and it's now Forest.
We should probably be a city that's known for having a couple of relatively average football clubs and Robin Hood. But Brian Clough didn't just put Forest at the top of the football, he put the city there as well. The story is rather legendary, probably the greatest story in football in terms of how a team went from what is now the Championship, I think it was 16th, 17th in the league, within 3 or 4 years was winning the football championship and going into Europe and not just winning it once but defending it as well in 1980.
Nottingham Forest were like one of Adidas's poster boys. Like we were on all of their like global adverts that they were putting in magazines and newspapers. Trevor Francis was like the Messi of today for Adidas, which is bananas to think about.
Trevor Francis, Archie Gemmell, that's Martin O'Neill on the back, Larry Lloyd, Kenny Burns, John Robertson, John O'Hare, Tony Woodcock, Gary Birtles, Peter Shilton, Ian Bowyer, Frank Clark. I think that's about covered it. I think. We started with the John McGovern with the European Cup and it just spiralled from there.
I was here for 4 years. My last game was the European Cup final against Malmo. We've hardly ever deviated because of who we were playing against. He felt that we were good enough to play our own game and impose that on the opposition. And that was it. That day he said, there's no way you can lose against this team. And he was right, you know.
He was like a god walking down the corridors. It was, you know, I'd never experienced somebody with an aura like that.
But he never did say very much before a game. One of his great strengths was simplicity. You know, he never complicated things.
Anybody that played in that European Cup winning side will talk about his genius of like, you stop the shots. You head the fucking ball over the halfway line. You get it and pass it. Give it to Fatty out there. You put a cross in. You score a fucking goal. That was it. They knew their jobs. That was it.
Meeting Clough for the first time was overwhelming. I was a mascot for a game in 1993 against Crystal Palace, one of Clough's last ever games in charge. I had quite bad eczema on my face at the time, and Clough just comes over to me and went, "Bloody hell, son, you are an ugly bugger." Because what have you been doing all afternoon? Headbutting pizzas. He then takes me into the physio's room and like Nigel Clough and Roy Keane are in there getting their legs done. And he says to Graham Lye, says, "We got anything for this young man's face?" I was just sort of, you know, you're being insulted by this god. And he gives me this stuff called Betnovate, which is a steroid-based ointment. Anyway, I had to see my doctor a lot as a kid. And it cleared it up. It was like miracle cream. So I used to have to go to the doctor with my mum, and the doctor was like, "Oh my God, have you taken wheat out of your diet or dairy or something?" I said, "No, I've got some Betnovate." He said, "You cannot put it on your face. It can cause skin cancer. It was tested on horses. Where on earth did you get it?" I said, "Well, Brian Clough get it, mate." And the doctor immediately, I'll never forget this, went, "You met Cloughie?" And my mum was like, "Hold on a second, is his face going to drop off or not?"
I can remember we won the youth league, and you know he dragged us out on the pitch. I think it was against Sunderland or something. The first team we were playing, walked us around, got a standing ovation from the entire city ground, and he gave every single one of us a hug. And he was in tears. You know, this is a man that loved the club, that was adored by the fans. I mean, good grief, the last day mean, the last day when they went down, and the entire City ground is on the pitch singing Brian Clough's Red and White Army, and he goes in and out. I think he went in and out 3 times, hugging all the police, all the fans. Can you imagine a team going down now and fans doing that? All of them staying behind, cheering his name, cheering him off. At the time, it was this crumbling empire. You've got this icon of football in a bit of trouble, you know, struggling with his health and all that kind of stuff.
And then in '93, I got a call from the then chairman, Fred Reacher. Brian had just resigned or just left, and he asked if I'd be interested in taking the job. I was manager for 3.5 years, got promoted back into the Premier League in my first season.
When we got promoted from First Division, as it was then, into the Premiership, we had some great players. Stan Collymore, obviously, is still one of what I think is probably one of the best centre forwards we've ever had.
I loved Collymore and I loved Keane and I loved Nigel Clough, but I always liked Steve Stone, Ian Wone, players like that. But Heenan! I was one of those idiots that bought like a Viking hat from the Forest shop and would wear it to Forest matches.
Finished 3rd in the Premier League in my 2nd season.
When that all started bubbling, the Frank Clark thing started bubbling, Europe started bubbling, just feeling that lift of a team growing and growing.
I went to every single game that season, home and away, and it was just phenomenal. I think we went into end of October sort of top of the league, had a little bit of a wobble, never quite got back up there, but to see us holding our own and finishing in what would now be a Champions League place, demolishing teams on occasion, 7-1 away at Sheffield Wednesday is the one everybody remembers, was just phenomenal.
Those atmospheres were special.
And obviously Stuart Pearce was there as captain and a passionate player, just to say the least.
Stuart Pearce was my favourite ever player.
Oh, Pearce #1 for me.
Was more than just a footballer, meant more to the club, meant more to the team. He was a master of crowd manipulation, master of it.
Every game he'd come out and go straight to the Trent End and sort of raise his fists, so you'd get 5,000 people in the old Trent End behind the goal all sort of chanting, "Psycho, psycho, psycho."
I mean, I'm sure that won games.
And then the next couple of seasons were a bit of a struggle, so I resigned.
I mean, you have to remember, Frank Clark left the club, got sacked, whatever it was, and he was 8th in the Premier League. I mean, imagine that as a Forest fan now. That was seen as a failure.
It was at that point, I think, where things kind of went off the rails for us as a football club. We slipped out of the Premier League in '99, and we've ended up ever since. We're 21 years later, and we're still here.
I'm sick of talking to taxi drivers about, when are Forest going to be in the Premier League? It drives me mad, and I can't find the romance in the Championship. I can't enjoy the volatility of it. I can't agree that it's one of the best leagues in the world. Being in it is hell.
It must have been early 2000s, Nigel Doherty came in as chairman and owner of the football club.
My dad was a lifelong Forest fan, and there was never any debate that I too would be. He took over the club in the 90s after Forest hit some pretty severe financial difficulties, loaned them some money. Don't think he was ever wanting or thought he was going to get the money back. He saw it fully as a community investment into the club, which was, his #1 love. I'd like to say I was, but I'll take second best, it's all right.
It was a great thing for us because he was one of us, most importantly. He's a huge fan, lived and grew up locally, so it mattered to him as much as it did to us.
An example of how hardcore we are as a Forest family. Yeah, Dad would always be like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And Michael and I's response would be a new striker.
And also a very astute businessman, so he where you get some clubs that are owned by people that have an affiliation with the club, they perhaps mismanage it because they're so passionate and they just plough money into it, and ultimately it fails and they lose that money. Where Nigel was a proper businessman who understood what he was doing. And towards the end of that period when he was owner, I think fans started to think they wanted something that was unrealistic, and in hindsight, given what's happened to him as well, I think people look back and feel a bit stupid about the way that they behaved.
I became the chairman when Nigel Doughty decided that he didn't want to be the upfront man taking all all the barbs and the stick that was coming to the club at that time. But Nigel unfortunately died in the February. I came in the October, and then he died suddenly in the February, and it was then it became very, very difficult then. He was financing the club to the tune of about £1 million a month, covering the losses. And after he died, it wasn't as easy to get that kind of support. And the club were in danger of, if not going into, not liquidation, but certainly into administration. Things were really, really difficult.
So then 2012, 2013, Fawaz comes in and...
It was chaos.
I mean, the Fawaz, it drove me mad.
Everyone gets excited because we've got a Kuwaiti owner who has links to the royal family, apparently, has billions of pounds in the bank, apparently.
So when it first happened, you go, well, this is interesting, we've got a Middle Eastern takeover, Kuwaiti oil money or whatever, and then obviously the reality is that it's not oil money, it's kind of air conditioning. And is it his money, or is it his wife's money, or he clearly just didn't understand anything about football.
Became a laughing stock, on and off the pitch. Bills not being paid, players not being paid. That ownership and the people that he had around him, sadly, were not fit to run a football club.
Fucking, oh man, never own a restaurant and never own a football club if you don't know that industry intimately well. So I just think sadly, football clubs have become playthings for egomaniacs. And if you don't appoint the right people and your pockets aren't deep enough, this isn't just a business venture that your pride's going to take this is a community asset you've drilled into the floor. You're doing something to the city of Nottingham and to the people of Nottingham when you do that to them.
His lasting legacy is 2 big screens in the City ground, and that's it. And we would happily forget everything else that he did.
Forest, whatever owner we've had, whatever manager we've had, whatever troubles we've had, have always kept our identity as a traditional English football club. Derby have just gone down such an embarrassing route.
I think we are the most closely associated rivals that probably has ever been. We are deeply similar in terms of the size of our clubs.
Strangely enough, it wasn't until a certain Mr. Clough went to Derby that there was any real rivalry between Forest and Derby. It was always Forest and Leicester.
Obviously the history is fantastic for a rivalry, that Clough managed us both, that so many players have gone between the two clubs is great for the rivalry. In modern years, I think they have, as a club, gone in the wrong direction, and that has really fed the rivalry.
I just think they're a bit of a joke.
The stadium is a disgrace.
It kind of epitomises them that they sit in one of them football grounds in the middle of an industrial estate.
Now, I never went to the baseball ground, but I gather from people who went, that was like a proper old football ground. You can't say Pride Park. I mean, even calling it Pride Park was embarrassing.
I always thank the Lord that they are our rivals, because they just do the most ridiculous things.
They're shit. And they've done all the stuff that's the shit stuff that comes with success, but with failure.
As far as Derby's concerned, it is a real passion. I mean, there is a dislike between both, lots of supporters, and it's always good to get one over them.
But they probably think we're a bit of a joke.
Can you name all the managers since Brian Clough?
Christ.
Frank Clark.
Dave Bassett.
May as well have had Mike Bassett.
Atkinson.
David Platt.
Yeah, it might have been Paul Hart.
Joe Kinnear.
Megson.
Oh Christ, Megson. I've obviously blotted that one out, haven't I?
Calderwood. Billy Davis.
Steve fucking McLaren.
Steve Cotterill. Sean O'Driscoll.
Oh God, of course. Oh, O'Driscoll. Oh, I felt so bad for O'Driscoll when he got fired.
Alex McLeish. Back to Billy Davis again.
Oh my God, who come after Billy again?
Obviously Stuart Pearce, although we had Gary Brazil prior to Pearce starting permanently as one of his 3 million stints as caretaker.
Dougie Friedman. Philip Montagnier.
Mark Warburton.
Warburton.
Ita Karanka.
Martin O'Neill.
And now the current fella, Sabri.
It'd be nice to have a manager that actually completes the season. I've done that since Billy Davis left in 2011.
For me, the big positive out of the Fawaz era is the fan groups that emerged at the end, whether that's Supporters Trust or whether that's other fan groups as well. That came from everybody being together, against Fawaz perhaps, but they had a common cause to bond them.
We fought against the owner, but we also carried on fighting for the club.
The organisation of the Forest fans has been amazing. You know, all the boats on the Trent and all that kind of stuff. It's magnificent.
It's not some fantastic movement which is designed to kind of change the world. It's just giving people that bit of a vehicle to get involved. We do things that try to be good. We put the plaque on the original pub where the club was formed. The obviously big displays speak for themselves, and that's what we try and do, just feel good stuff. The 150th anniversary that was celebrated that same season, it was just been absolutely missed. A few of us got together and it was actually the birth of what we do now, Forza Garibaldi. We did our own thing. We met at the pub where they formed the club in 1865. We did like this thing, we got the historian to speak, we got one or two ex-players to come along and talk, and it was very much a community thing, and we started something I think a little bit that day that kind of was the catalyst for a lot of good things happening, and we stayed up, I think by goal difference in the end on that last day of the season. And I do think the fact that the fans generally didn't just turn their backs on the club, I think was worth that, whether it was that single point or whether it was that single couple of goals that kept us up. And I do believe that was an important lesson, how football fans can be so important to a club.
Football culture is what keeps me going to Forest. I just love the day out, and I love being with mates and the drinking and the camaraderie and the wit of it all. But in terms of Nottingham Forest, my life is worse because we're in the Championship. I need us to be in the Premier League.
Nice to see you again. So.
With Sabri Lamouchi, I mean, I think when he come in, everybody were like, here we go again. Who the hell's this guy?
If anyone from Nottingham says, oh yeah, Sabri Lamouchi, I knew all about him, I'd followed his playing and manager career, they're lying. No one knew who he was.
We are doing well, and it's very positive for the players, it's very positive for the club, for me of course, for my staff as well.
Now you've got this team, this group of players and manager and staff around him that is kind of echoing what happened off the pitch with these fans groups and this focus on moving forwards and togetherness. And this team's just great. Like, you can see it, that it actually matters to them. There is this camaraderie, there's a group of players that have been brought together and clearly care. And again, I don't think we've seen that for a decade, 2 decades. Surely that has an impact on where we are in the league and why we're up towards the top of the table.
Because of where Forest were financially, at times they've had no choice. They've had to play youngsters at times, and I think they're reaping the benefit from that now. Joe Worrell is an example of that, but so too Matty Cash. Some of those youngsters have had 50, 100 games to get used to the Championship, and now there is the expectation and the ambition, and they've got the grounding within the Championship to fall back on.
I remember I came on trial and I drove here, and then I came straight to the City ground and I stood over there and I was like, wow, I'd love to play here one day. And yeah, luckily 4 years on, I've played a few games here now.
The tantalising hope that this season particularly has given me is I can't engage with it. I can't get too excited. Deep down I know there's a real chance here, but we've been here before, and it affects me.
In Championship, you need to be consistent, and they lost a lot of points the last weeks, the last games. But to say it's a good time to play against them, I'm not sure, because it's always tough against all teams, but against Leeds more than the other, because it's a big game for us, but I think also for them.
City ground is a little bit ramshackle, but we all love it. On the banks of the River Trent, coming across Trent Bridge or Lady Bay, and you see this place, and every stand is a bit different. Every stand's got that little bit of identity to it. I like the character and the soul of the City ground. On the days when it does come alive, there is nowhere better in the whole country.
so many groups of fans all over the place that just think it's enough. I pay my money, I can sit and shout at everyone. It's like, well, you can. It's like life. You've paid your money, you're in. You can sit and shout at everyone, or do you ante up and you just go, right, I'm going to be come on, let's go and be the best possible fans. When Forest are doing well, incredible fans. Metaphorically got the team by the scruff of the neck, carrying, pushing them through, pushing them on. Not all clubs have that.
The players from Forest, they start to dream like the fans.
I think maybe we all love what it represents and what it brings as well. Great faces that you see, some you know, some you don't. The fact that so many of my good pals have come from standing next to him in the ground down the years. They are a fantastic football club. People love what Forest represent, the home on the river, the heritage that we have, and the fans that keep turning out every week despite how rubbish we may be. That's what I love about Forest.
When I think about the amazing moments of euphoria that Forest has given me, the wonderful, not even just the moments of technical skill, the collective feeling. Where else on earth do you ever go on a weekly basis with 30,000 people? I'd have been robbed of so much happiness. I would be a less happy, less positive, less fulfilled person.
Nottingham Forest is the best church imaginable. We go and praise this weird god of football every Saturday, sing a bunch of ridiculous songs in the vain hope that we'll get an outcome that may or may not happen, with a community that keeps us incredibly strong and looked after. Nottingham Forest to me is family.